We mocked my husband about me being in charge at a party, but then he stood up and did this.
I still remember that night like it was yesterday. The night everything came crashing down. That party that should never have happened, and those truths that should never have been said. I remembered hosting the party, preparing everything that was needed. I was the planner. I had always planned for things ahead because I hated surprises or being caught off guard by something unnecessary. I was already regarded as the perfect host because of how well my parties usually turned out. That day, I had decided to do something out of the ordinary. My husband was against it, but I decided I was going to because I have always been headstrong, and most times I came across to people as the dominating type. I didn't always mind so long as it gave me what I wanted at that moment. I didn't know I was going to eventually ruin myself that way. Hello, Reddit. Let me introduce myself before I dive fully into the story. I am Emma, a 34-year-old woman. I worked as a banker, and you probably know how demanding it is to be a banker. I got married as early as age 22, and I have 2 kids, a girl and a boy, both 11 and 9 respectively. My husband, Ryan, was a stay-at-home husband. Well, not what you're thinking. He worked from home. He owned a remote company that dealt with building apps and those tech stuffs. I don't know much about them. So he was quite successful on his own. But he chose to stay at home because he knew how demanding my job was and sacrificed his own by creating a work-study room for himself where he could work when the kids weren't around. How we met was a really funny story. He had come invited to a party of a mutual friend of ours in which I was also present. The party was very loud and filled with drugs and alcohol and horny youths, and at the time I didn't exactly like situations where I had no control. So I had tried to leave the party only to be bumped into by this weird, sweaty guy. I knew he must have been drunk or high on something, or was probably dancing to the crazy hardcore music, so I just looked at him in disgust and made for the door. He had followed me and had insisted on apologizing for bumping into me, but I was only half listening because I had wanted to get out of there fast. He, probably observing my mood and impatience, told me there wasn't a cab I could board around because it was already midnight, and he offered to take me because he was also planning on leaving too. I was surprised because I had expected someone of his own physique and handsomeness would definitely catch the ladies' eyes, so would most definitely enjoy the party. I remember being so surprised by his decision to leave the party when it had barely begun that I asked him why, and he had grinned and told me he had just come there because he was invited and he had planned on dashing in and out of the party, and so had come in his sweatshirt and pants because he came from jogging exercise. We hit it off from there, and we exchanged contacts and kept in touch until he asked me to date him and eventually to marry him. And of course I said yes. We got married in a small local church that meant a lot to me because of how I was revered there, and because I was able to plan every detail of my wedding, even up to the tiniest thing as flowers. I baked my cake for my wedding, I designed my dress but gave it to a designer to help me with the sewing, and I handed out the wedding invites myself. I even handled Ryan's suit for the wedding, and it was perfect. If you're wondering why Ryan didn't do anything, it was because it's always easier to let me have my way and do my thing, because I hated to see any spot of unplanned imperfections. Never. Did I mention my parents never showed up for my wedding? Oh yeah, you heard right. My father had always been a very controlling and strict father. When I was younger, he told me what to wear, how to dress, what to eat, and when there was a little rebellion from my end, he would make sure I paid for it dearly. So it just became easier to obey him and not get on his bad side. Same thing with my mom, too. She was like a muted mouse on a leash. She didn't do anything except what she was told by my father. So there was never a surprise birthday party or a dinner that wasn't originally on the food timetable or a vacation that just suddenly was decided. Everything was always dictated by my father. I wasn't even allowed to call him Dad the way my friends did with their parents. My mom only addressed him as my husband. Never the sweet pet names I hear my friends tell me their parents called each other at home. I was never indulged as a kid, and I had sworn to myself, even as a child, that I would never be like my mother. So when I was old enough to leave the house without it being considered a rebellion by my father, that is going to college, which was even closer to home than I would have wished, I left and never returned, even on holidays. Everything about my life was planned towards not turning into my mother. I planned everything for myself. the kinds of friends I had, my reading timetable, my schedules, the kinds of food I ate, and everything else. I didn't have anything surprising happen because I hated it so much, so my friends knew and respected that, even though it was only after an incident that happened. It was my birthday, and as usual, I had planned what I wanted to do. Buy a cupcake, eat and sip my hot tea while lying in my bed, and read the newest collection of my books on history that I had just obtained. I had gotten to my dorm that night, and everything was dark in the room, which was surprising because we had no notice of light out. So I had reached for the switch, and then came the shout of surprise and happy birthday songs. I remember being so angry that I threw the cake to the floor and ordered everyone out of my space. I didn't bother with an apology even after then, so everyone minded their business from then on. In fact, on my birthday, I just wished a simple happy birthday, no cake, no gifts, and I was honestly fine with it. It was what I wanted. I didn't enjoy being surprised. When Ryan had even proposed, I was already aware he was going to because he had shown me the ring prior to the time, and I was even the one who chose the venue, invited our friends over, and did everything else. Oh yeah, back to why my parents didn't show up at my wedding. After graduating by then, I had already met Ryan, and we had started our relationship, so it was a mutual decision not to waste time dating for years before getting married. Mind you, it was more my decision than Ryan's, and he just agreed with it. So I went to visit my parents after years of not doing so, and told them I would be getting married. Well, as you must have guessed, my father opposed it, and as usual, my mother was mute. I could swear that the woman hardly said a word without getting approval from him. I was adamant and went ahead with it anyway, and they didn't show up. My father, because he couldn't agree to let me, another of his controlled tools, out of his hands, and my mother because my father was her God, his yes, his no, her no. I had planned to get pregnant almost immediately after marriage, the reason being that I wanted to give birth first before I started my career so they both wouldn't contradict. So luckily for me, I became pregnant 2 months after our wedding, and I was over the moon. Initially, before we got married, Ryan had bought a cottage that was pretty nice and well spaced, with 6 rooms, including 2 bathrooms, so it was a perfect fit to raise our kids. I wanted 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and Ryan didn't oppose it, saying whichever one came, he was fine with it. I got busy all through my pregnancy because I made the nursery into my perfect style, and I bought girls' clothes and toys, purposely believing strongly that I was carrying a female child in me. And when it was time to give birth, I gave birth to the beautiful baby girl, Alicia. She became my world, and I took very good care of her. If she sneezed, I was already at her side, checking her breathing and heart rate. If she cried, my heart ached, and I would do anything in my power to stop her crying. Ryan would tell me to take a breather and stop overreacting, but I wouldn't. I wanted to shower with so much attention, the attention I didn't receive from my own parents. I wanted her to have it all. I became pregnant again when Alicia was 1 year old, and though I didn't plan for it, it was the one surprise I was pleased to have. I did what I did when I was pregnant with Alicia, and hoped strongly for a boy, and yes, I gave birth to my beautiful baby boy, George. I started paying less attention to Alicia, and focused more on George because he was born a fragile baby as early as 7 months, and I was very scared to lose him. When George was 2 years old and Alicia 3, I decided I wanted to start up my career. I was fed up with sitting at home and having to wait for Ryan. I hated depending on him, even though he wouldn't complain. I guess at that point, I wanted some sort of validation that I was still in charge of my life and no one else had an upper hand. When I told Ryan of my decision, he was surprised but didn't oppose it. I mean, how could he have? I was strong-headed, remember? I got a job at a local bank at first. The workload was easy and a bit flexible, but because I wanted to reach the top as fast as I could, I worked harder than anyone else, becoming the last person to leave work and going back home later than usual when the children were already asleep, and leaving home very early, even before the children were up. So eventually, it became Ryan's duty to sacrifice his time and work hours to fit in the kids. I didn't mind. I spent less time with the kids because even on Saturdays and Sundays, when I was supposed to be at home, I was usually organizing small parties for my bosses and attending events with them. I was eventually promoted within a year of working there, which was a shock to everyone except me, because the normal promotion happened within 2-year intervals. In my 3rd year working at the bank, I was transferred out of town, and I was very excited. I started planning everything: the school the kids were going to attend, the house we were going to live in, how we would have to sell the cottage to get extra cash, and literally everything. I had gotten every detail planned in my head, and so I just told Ryan what his part was in the plan. Ryan got agitated and refused to uproot his life just like that for an unknown place. I became upset and accused him of not being considerate and not being happy I was making progress. So I stopped talking to him and committed to more late nights to trash any attempt of his to resolve our argument, because I knew the longer it took, the more uncomfortable he would become, and he would eventually agree with me. He eventually did and told me he was ready to move with me, but because of how demanding my new job would be, he'd have to work more from home to take care of the kids. I agreed. I wasn't about to sacrifice my career to be a stay-at-home mom. We moved as planned. Sorry, I meant as I had planned. I had booked the truck coming for our luggage a week before, and that was even during the period Ryan and I had issues regarding moving out of town. We sold our cottage at half price and took all our things except for paintings on the wall, which I didn't like so much. I had thought, new places, new paintings. Moving took 2 days, and we were safely in another town. This place wasn't the same. Not noisy and less crowded as our former place. It was rather noisy, and it seemed everybody was just moving so fast. For 2 weeks after we moved there, the noisiness kept the children and me awake, having restless nights until we eventually got used to it. Their nights were like normal day, because the same activities occur. The only difference was the dark clouds at night and clear ones in the day. Another issue we had when we moved was the hiked prices of everything. But I wasn't bothered really, and when Ryan brought it up, I got angry and snapped, saying I could as well take care of us with my new salary if spending money was his problem. He didn't say anything after that time, and eventually we settled in, got the kids in the school I had already chosen, paid for everything, and they started schooling. After then, everything else that happened was a blur. My work became more demanding that I began to spend the nights of my weekdays at hostels because of how late I was working, and I didn't want to disturb the kids, or Ryan having to wake up from sleep to open the door. The kids rarely saw me, and when they did, I was too tired and stressed to talk or play with them. My hard work paid off, and I was promoted more rapidly than usual, and it satisfied me greatly. I thought that was everything I needed and wanted. I couldn't ask for more. But yet I kept working, slaving myself so I could get one thing, the thing I didn't know. I know better now, though, only because I already lost it, and it was too late to take them back. My friends would tease me on how hard I took life, and how I didn't enjoy myself enough, and back then, I thought maybe that was what was missing. I had a perfect home, an understanding husband, 2 beautiful kids, and the most amazing job I could ever ask for. And still yet, I craved something. What I craved, I didn't understand what exactly it was. At first, I started to reduce my workload as advised by one of my close friends and delegate, so I could spend more time with my kids and Ryan. But I guess the years I had spent not giving attention to them had driven them further away from me without me even noticing. I couldn't even guess my kids' favorite food right. One morning, I had taken a leave and decided to cook for them, which, by the way, turned out to be a total disaster. Ryan was pleasantly surprised to see me cooking. I had made pancakes for the kids and a simpler meal for Ryan because I knew he didn't eat heavily, especially in the mornings. Excited for the kids to say thank you and be pleased, I was heavily disappointed when Alicia crunched her nose and told me she hated pancakes. Ryan also told me he now ate slightly larger portions of meals to keep up with the energy he spent in the gym. I didn't even know he started gym classes. George tried to eat, but that became one of the worst regrets in my life, as apparently George was allergic to milk, and I was the last one to hear of that. Thankfully, Ryan always had an EpiPen with him in case of situations like that, and it was all under control within an hour. Though he, Ryan, had to take him to the hospital to check if he was really okay and wouldn't have an aftershock. I was devastated. I had absolutely no control over the situation. I was helpless. I couldn't do anything as I watched my boy gasp for breath as a result of my own doing, and Alicia looked at me with eyes exactly like mine, but filled with contempt, and I was very unhappy. It was a very hard nut to chew, but stupid me. What did I do to handle the situation? I went back to work, because at least I had more control over that. I was the boss. My instructions weren't defied because that meant you were ready to be made redundant. It was my safe space, I guess, being in control. I started organizing parties for the rich so as to have them banking with us. And from what I said earlier, I was the perfect host, so the parties usually yielded positive results as we had more and more customers. I became unsatisfied with organizing those parties at home and used my savings to buy a beautiful mansion. I wanted my home to be the party hosting venue, and I wanted to be talked about as having it all. I didn't tell Ryan and only informed him after I'd already made the payment for the house and bought some things in it. When I eventually did tell Ryan, he just shrugged and asked that I inform the kids by myself. I did, expecting squeals and happiness because they now had a beautiful home to stay in, but they just nodded and excused themselves. I was angry, thinking that Ryan had turned the kids against me, but I still didn't care. All I wanted was the fame and the name, the woman in control, the boss lady. When we moved into the home I bought after some weeks, I wasted no time organizing the parties, what I do best, and they turned out amazing as usual. By then, every rich person in town, including celebrities, wanted an invite to my parties, so they started banking with us to be invited to the best hosts' parties. In a matter of 6 months, I had hosted 10 parties successfully in my new home, each one bigger and better than the last. My children made themselves scarcely available when it was time for those parties, including my husband, and I didn't mind because I didn't want to have to help watch what he said so he wouldn't give me a bad reputation. That was until one of the celebrities I refused to invite to my party because of his scandalous stories online started to slander me and say that I invited only the rich and mighty to my parties except my own husband. I was very pissed and lashed out at Ryan, telling him he wanted to ruin me by not attending the parties his own wife hosted. And of course, Ryan, the peacemaker between us, started to attend my parties. Though I was the one responsible for his clothes for the parties, ensuring that nothing was missing from his hair down to his shoes. He would escort me to my parties, and of course, as I had told him, I wanted to play the perfect husband role. I didn't mind that after all the parties ended, we slept at opposite ends of the beds and Ryan wouldn't even look at me, let alone touch me. At that point, I was only trying to prove one thing, that I could do well without being controlled by a man. Everything was going my way, the way I planned for it to go, and it was all perfect. My dad died when I was 30 years of age, and of course, I didn't cry. I only attended his burial because of a sense of duty. I was the one who organized every detail of his burial, and of course, the people I had gotten acquainted with, some celebrities and politicians, showed up for that day, so I was already playing the perfect host again, not the daughter of a father who had just died. My mother just sat there staring blankly at the wall. She had been that way since I got the news of his death and came home. She wouldn't say anything or talk to anyone. I didn't exactly mind, as we rarely had anything to say to each other. All her life, she had said only what pleased my father, and done only what would make him grunt his approval. So I guess the thought of not having someone to tell you how to live or do things was scary. Ryan didn't come with me because he had an important deadline to deal with, so he only arrived a day before the burial. When he did, only then did my mother let out a sob and cry sadly into his chest, with Ryan's hands around her soothing her. I remember I had turned away then because I was hurt. How could she only sob when it was Ryan and not me? She hadn't even uttered a word to me since I arrived, and there she was, crying a bucket and whispering things only Ryan could hear. I had wondered then how they had even gotten that close when her own child, she had never called to ask how I was. I later shrugged it off and continued with the planning for his burial. He may not have been a good father, but I was thinking at that point that if I organized a beautiful ceremony for him, it would satisfy me that I wasn't anything like him. I had a heart. He didn't. I turned a deaf ear to my conscience pricking me at that point that I was turning exactly like him, as I had a husband that I didn't take care of, and children that most definitely hated me. After the whole ceremony, Ryan insisted my mom moved in with us. I refused and threatened him that he wasn't the owner of the house, and that I could as well throw him out if he stood on that decision. It was a mistake. Believe me, I didn't exactly mean it. so please don't blame me." Ryan didn't say anything after that, but I know now that I already dug my own grave deeper with what I said back then. Everything was going the way I wanted, though, and I didn't feel the need to correct anything I might have done. I continued with my lifestyle and continued to suppress any twinge of guilt that occasionally ran through my mind. I was living my life the way I chose to, even if it involved a little unhappiness from another side. It all didn't matter, so long as I got what I wanted. That was what I told myself to comfort myself and to kill any form of guilt I had, until that very day. That very one day that wasn't planned by me, but was indeed planned by my unconscious lifestyle and stupidity. That very day I lost everything. I mean everything. Before I tell you about that, I might as well confess my other sin. I was cheating on my husband. It was one reason I had the biggest clientele. Please don't blame me. I had no choice back then. It started when I was working at the local bank. I was indeed hardworking and put in my best as I wanted to kick off my career so badly. But it was frustrating at that point to even please anyone, especially since my boss back then only wanted my effort, not in the office but in his hostel room. I got so frustrated and eventually gave in. I had decided then that it was just going to be a one-time thing, but sadly it wasn't, and that of course got its desired result, as I was promoted faster than usual, but I grew greedy. I wanted more. I wanted to be the dominating one, not only in my relationship, but also in every other aspect. I wanted it so desperately not to end up like my mother, and I guess that continued my series of affairs I had. I slept my way to the top. I even slept with some of my clients to get them in my hand. The first time I had done it, I felt so guilty and wanted to confess everything to Ryan. But what held me back was the fact that then I'd lose the dominance in our relationship, and that felt like death for me at that moment. So I withheld the truth and continued in my sin. So yes, back to that night where I lost everything. I had decided to host a party, but this time outside my beautiful home because of the whispers going about that I didn't host parties except inside my own home. I had informed Ryan the morning before the party that he would be going with me, and he had just looked at me weirdly and looked away without giving me an answer. Honestly, thinking back, I think I should have suspected that something was wrong because the look didn't sit well with me, but I just regrettably, now, had shrugged it off. As usual, I had his outfit prepared and everything else good and ready to go. Ryan went and said goodbye to the kids, and, well, I couldn't, as I was the hated one in the family, so I just waited for him. Ryan wasn't his usual self, even at the party, but I was too busy to notice. Busy doing what, you might ask? Well, busy laughing with my friends and mocking some celebrities that weren't invited to my party. Ryan had by this time excused himself from the table to go get a drink when a friend of mine mockingly imitated my husband. I was irritated by that, but I had laughed because she was one of the biggest clients of the bank I worked for, so I couldn't afford to upset her. That night at that silly party, we mocked my husband about me being in charge of the house. But then Ryan had come back to the table, but I didn't notice as I was still snickering and telling them funny stories about him. I should have noticed the table had gone silent. I should never have done that. But I did, and when I eventually noticed him, it was when he dropped the drink he had obtained on the table with a smack sound and turned to leave. I panicked then and ran after him, but he just shrugged me off and told me he wanted a divorce and that he was leaving with the kids. I couldn't believe my ears and still tried to convince him that we were just playing around. But for the first time in my life, my husband, the loving guy I have known all our marriage, let out a bitter laugh and said in a very loud voice what he found out about just yesterday from his cousin. His cousin had told him about my secrets that I thought were well safe. Apparently, I had even slept with the said cousin with evidence to show for. I was too shocked to deny anything, and Ryan just left. How I left that party, I wouldn't know. All I knew is that when I got home, Ryan wasn't home and I raced to the kids' room. They weren't there either. There and then, I sat right in the middle of my big, beautiful home that now meant nothing to me and cried miserably. I had lost everything. I thought I was working hard not to become like my father, but I had already managed to turn into my father without knowing. The divorce papers came in faster than I expected, probably because his brother was a lawyer, and it clearly stated there that I had to give up rights on the kids. I cannot afford to lose them. I realized too late that everything I've worked for is nothing if I lost them. Life would be empty without them in it. And I realized that what I thought was work that could fill the emptiness inside me was the biggest lie I ever told myself. It's my kids and my husband, Ryan. Their love that could have filled that void. And now I've lost the right to even let them know how sorry I am. Please help me get back my kids and my husband. I'm desperately seeking help. I'll do anything at this point. I really need your help, please. Update. Hello, Reddit. It's me, Emma. It's been 2 months since the incident that ruined my life. Ryan refuses to hear my plea or allow me to see our kids. I feel awful and stupid about what I've done. I've managed to push away the one thing that should have mattered above every other thing away from me. I know I deserved all I got because it's obvious you guys even hate me from all the backlash I've received. But believe me, you don't hate me as much as I do. Did I mention I already quit my job? Oh yeah, I did. I couldn't bear to work in a place I thought was my best asset, only to lose what was important to me. My friends were obviously with me because I was tagged the perfect host, and so since there was no more party to my name, they dispersed one by one. I wasn't surprised when they did because it was not losing their friendship that hurt the most. It was losing my family. I pushed them off. Regrettably, now I cannot believe I eventually did become my father, without realizing it, a controlling, stupid, cheating brat. I sold my mansion too, and bought back the previous house we lived in so I could maybe feel their presence. But it just made me feel their absence even more. It reminded me of what I could have had, and how I lost it due to my own foolishness. I had the best husband and the most beautiful kids in the world, but I decided to gamble with them, and I lost. I lost badly. A month ago, I had gone to see my mother and lashed out at her, blaming her for everything. But the poor woman just burst out crying and apologizing because she didn't know that was what she was doing to me, helping to rebel not to be like her. She then told me that after I left home, my father changed and became a better man until he died. I was surprised that my father could be what she described him to be, but then that left me with more regrets. I didn't give the man any opportunity to reconcile with me. I just saw him as a controlling person, and I grew up and lived with that notion. I guess as well as being a bad mother and wife, I'm also a bad daughter. Life was so much harder at this point. Ryan still refused to talk to me and refused any attempt at reconciliation I made. I was stuck living with my own shame and guilt and the what-ifs. Most times in my dark room with my curtains let down, I just stared into the darkness and imagined all I could have done better, how I could have been a better mother to my kids and a better wife to Ryan. I miss them. I miss them so much. I miss hearing their giggles and laughs when Ryan played with them. I never joined them, as most times I was too tired, actions I now regret badly. I miss hearing Alicia read and correct George's assignments. I miss the little moments I had with them. I regrettably miss the times I took for granted. I miss Ryan, his dimpled cheek which becomes obvious when he smiles, his boyish way of behaving sometimes. Most especially, I miss the look of love in his eyes when he told me he loved me. I regret taking everything I had for free for granted. I wish so badly that I had been a better person. I cannot begin to imagine a lifetime without them because presently, this moment is already torturous enough. I had everything on a platter of gold, and I threw it carelessly away. I'm stuck now in the vicious cycle I created for myself. Just how does one rectify what cannot be rectified? How do you rewrite the wrongs you've done? How do you unhurt people you hurt? How do you say sorry when your sin is way past it? I cannot believe just how I had everything and lost it in just a night. It's true what they say, that your sins end up catching up with you. Update. Hello again, Reddit. This is my last post here. I know most of you hate me because of what I did and how I hurt the people I care about. But still, thank you for reading my story. I really appreciate the hate and the little support I got. Everything's still the same. We're officially divorced now. I had no choice but to sign the papers. And before I did, I begged for one chance to see my kids, and it was the most bittersweet experience. Alicia and George came to the meeting spot we agreed on, but were so formal and rigid with me. I tried everything to get them to warm up to me, but I guess I already lost even that with them. At least I got to see them one more time, even though it didn't turn out how I planned. The last time I saw Ryan was when we were in court to get officially divorced. His eyes that were once filled with love for me were hard and unreadable. He refused any sort of help from my money for the kids, and I refused his settlement too. When we were done and he headed for the door, I had called out to him, and the way he turned and stared at me again with his unreadable eyes had me glued to a spot. I couldn't say anything. Words stuck in my throat and I felt bile rising. I was only able to mutter a "take care," but even that didn't get any response from him, and he turned and left. That has been the last I've heard from them. So let me end with this note. Don't ever be like me. Don't lose your family no matter what. With love from this bad mother/wife/daughter. My name is Carl. It's a short form of my name, and for personal and private reasons, all other names I use here will be fake. I am 26 years of age. Also, I work as an event planner. It was at an event I had gone to work 3 years ago I got to meet Alex. He was the best man of the bridegroom. At first glance, I had been drawn to his looks and charming smile. To be honest, I was charmed by him on the spot, even though he hadn't noticed me then. I remembered him coming to me and asking me if I could plan an event for his company, since he liked how the wedding had been perfectly done. That was what led us to start talking, and then ended up dating for a couple of months before finally getting married. Alex, my husband, worked as a freelance writer, which gave him a flexible schedule. He would often work from home, which I thought was great since he could take care of the household chores and cook dinner while I was away at events. He seemed to enjoy his work, writing articles and blog posts for various clients. As much as he cared and loved me, I noticed that he didn't really do much at home. He didn't even help with cleaning or cooking when I was out there working. I would leave him working on his laptop and still come back late with him still hitting away on his laptop. Honestly, I have no single idea about how this writing works, but then nothing should prevent him from helping me out sometimes. Looking back, I realize he had way too much free time on his hands. He would often take long breaks, saying he needed to research or meet with clients, and that was what pissed me off, and I told him he should do the cooking now because I am busy with work. Now I am divorced. Don't be surprised about that. Yes, we ended up divorcing. He brought the divorce letter and told me to sign it, which I did without thinking about it twice, and now I am regretting what I did. Everything started when I told him to do the cooking. I had come home from work in the evening so stressed out, I saw that the dishes were not washed, and washing the dishes and cooking after was going to add to my already stressed out state. And there, my husband was writing on his desk. I was sure he hadn't even known I entered the room. I told him to do the cooking while I washed the dishes, and he just waved off my request with a void expression. That got me so pissed off that I didn't know I reacted too much by throwing my heels at him, but ended up hitting the screen of his laptop, which ended up damaged. That was the first time I had seen him so angry and beastly that he almost hit me but didn't. He said he only had some hours left to submit a pitch for a client before the deadline ended, and I had ended up making him lose a gig. He was in so much pain that night that he left home. He said I didn't understand his line of work and thought he was always lazing around the house the whole day while I went to work. Days passed, and I was still reeling from the fight with Alex when I met Ben. He was this super charming and successful guy from Chicago who needed my help planning a corporate event. We met at a coffee shop, and I was immediately drawn to his warm smile and easygoing nature. I mean, who wouldn't be? He was like a breath of fresh air after being stuck in a rut with Alex. We started talking about the event, but before I knew it, we were sharing stories and laughing like old friends. I felt a connection with him that I hadn't felt in ages. And yeah, I know it was wrong to feel that way, especially since I was a full-fledged married woman. But I couldn't help it. I was lonely, and he was charming. We started texting each other, and at first it was all about the event. But soon we were sharing our hopes and dreams, our fears and insecurities. It was like we had known each other for years. And before I knew it, we were meeting in secret, sneaking around like teenagers. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't help myself. I was addicted to the way he made me feel. After the event, I thought that would be it. That is, I'd done my job, and Ben would go back to his life in Chicago. But nope, we just couldn't seem to cut ties. He'd text that we should meet up after my work hours, and we'd meet for coffee or lunch or even just a quick drink. Sometimes when I denied his request not wanting to meet with him, he'd come up with some excuse about needing to discuss business or future events, but I knew it was just a ruse. And honestly, I didn't care. I was having the time of my life. We'd laugh and joke and just enjoy each other's company. It was like we'd known each other for a long time, not just a few weeks. And before I knew it, we were meeting up every week, sometimes even twice a week. I'd tell myself it was just harmless fun, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. I was falling for him, hard, and I could tell he felt the same way. We'd catch each other's eye and just know what the other was thinking. It was like we had our own little world, our own little secret, and I was addicted to it. I knew I should end it. I was still married after all, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I can't even believe it happened. One minute we were laughing and joking in his car. The next, well, let's just say we got a little too close for comfort. We got caught up in the moment, in our own wrong little world. Things happened so fast, everything around us was blurry. That moment, nothing else mattered except for the two of us. But as soon as it was over, reality hit us like a ton of bricks. We both knew we'd crossed a line, and we didn't know how to go back. The guilt and shame were suffocating me. I kept thinking about my husband and how I'd betrayed him in the worst possible way. And Ben, well, he just disappeared. No more texts, no more calls, no more nothing. It was like he vanished into thin air. I was left to deal with the aftermath of our little tryst, alone and confused. I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I was so ashamed. And the worst part? I knew I'd never be able to go back to the way things were before. I decided to settle things with Alex, who was trying to be distant from me, to show how hurt he was by my actions, because I later realized he lost the client and his gig. He couldn't even get his pay for some work he had done for him in the past. I apologized to him after he had come back from meeting a client and prepared his favorite dish. I didn't mind that I would continue doing the cooking and dishes alone. I just wanted my old husband back. That night, I pleased him, and I was happy that he laughed with me and then ranted to me about his experience with his clients. I made sure that we made love that night and pleasured him to his satisfaction. I was willing to do whatever it took to make things right between us, but little did I know he was just biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to drop the bombshell. At first, it was just little things. He'd mention a work trip here and there, and I'd believe him, of course. I mean, why wouldn't I? He's my husband, and I trust him. But then, he started getting more and more frequent. He'd say things like, "I'm heading to New York to meet with a potential client. Gotta make some connections." Or, "I'm off to Los Angeles to get some inspiration for this new project." And I'd be like, "Okay, babe, have a safe trip." But then, he'd mention Daisy. Oh, Daisy. She was this real estate agent who needed a writer to work with her. And apparently, Alex was the only one who could do the job. He'd say things like, Daisy needs him to meet up with her in Chicago to discuss the project. Or he is heading to Miami to work with Daisy on this new campaign. And I'd feel this pang of jealousy, but I'd push it aside. I mean, he's just working, right? But the truth is, I had no idea what he was really doing on those trips, and I didn't want to know. I just wanted my happy marriage back. I wanted us to go back to the way things were before, when we'd laugh and joke together, when we'd share our hopes and dreams. But deep down, I knew that the chances of that ever returning fully were slim. And then one day, he dropped the bombshell. He came home from one of his trips and told me he needed space. He said he was feeling suffocated. And I was like, what's going on? What's wrong? But he just shook his head and said he needed time to figure things out. I was surprised and eventually left in a state of shock. I felt like my world was crashing down around me. I didn't know what to do, so I did the only thing I could think of. I gave him space. I let him have his time, hoping that he'd come back to me, that he'd realize he loved me and want to work things out. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, I realized that was never going to happen. He was gone, and he wasn't coming back. I wondered why he suddenly distanced himself from me. He wouldn't even touch the food I cooked for him, or sleep on the same bed with me. One night I had tried to touch him. He had said he was tired and packed some of his stuff to the other room. I thought it was Daisy that took him away. He was a man, and spending time with another woman could warm his heart to her and have an affair with her. I thought he was cheating. I didn't even think he cheated. I believed he was cheating because he was always on the phone every night, and I knew it was none other than Daisy. I wanted to tell someone about my troubles, but didn't even want to involve our families into this. I didn't want the matter to get out of hand, and involving our friends would be like giving them the latest topic to gist about, and I decided to do this. For the first time in months, I texted Ben. I wanted us to see. He replied hours later and said he was going to call me soon. He did call, and he sounded so excited on the phone, and he proposed we meet in his office. When I arrived at his workplace, I realized that he was the director of this big law firm. Oh, I didn't mention he was a lawyer earlier. I saw him in a new light, and the way he told his workers to respect me gave me the thrills and the affection I had for him rekindled. I asked him why he never texted or called, and he made me know that he didn't wish to ignore me, but he saw that I felt guilty that day of our affair and didn't want me to do things against my wish. When he asked me why I had come to see him, I didn't tell him that my marriage was collapsing. I just told him I missed him. As we sat in his office, I couldn't help but feel a spark reignite between us. The way he smiled at me, the way he leaned in when I spoke, it all felt so familiar and yet so thrilling. We chatted for a bit, catching up on each other's lives, and then he asked me if I'd like to grab lunch with him. I agreed, and we walked to a nearby cafe, enjoying the warm sun on our skin and the gentle breeze. As we sat down at a cozy table, he reached across and took my hand. We talked some more, laughing and joking like we used to, and I felt myself getting lost in his eyes. It was like no time had passed at all, and yet everything had changed. We started meeting up regularly, always in secret, always with a sense of excitement and rebellion. We'd steal glances at each other, hold hands when no one was looking, and exchange sweet texts when we were apart. I couldn't believe I was doing this again. Sneaking around, lying to my husband, risking everything for a thrill. It was like I was trapped in some kind of toxic cycle, but there was something about Ben that drew me in, something that made me feel alive. We'd meet in secret, and to be honest, these secret meetings were filled with so much passion and excitement. I felt like I was living a double life, one foot in my comfortable but loveless marriage, the other in this all-consuming affair. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once, like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, prone to fall at any time. Ben was everything my husband wasn't, exciting, passionate, attentive. He made me feel seen and heard in a way that I hadn't felt in years. He'd listen to me for hours, his eyes locked on mine, his fingers tracing patterns on my skin. He'd make me laugh, make me cry, make me feel like I was home. And yet, I knew it was wrong. I knew I was playing with fire, risking everything for this illicit thrill, my marriage, my reputation, my very sense of self. All of it was on the line, but I couldn't help myself. I was addicted to the way Ben made me feel, addicted to the excitement he enchanted. We'd meet in hotel rooms, in parked cars, in hidden corners of the city. We'd steal glances at each other, our hands touching accidentally as we walked side by side. It was like we were teenagers again, sneaking around and going to parks to do things we had longed for so much. But we weren't teenagers. We were adults, with responsibilities and consequences. And I knew that eventually, our secrets would catch up with us. Eventually the truth would come out and my world would come crashing down, but I couldn't stop. I was in too deep, too far gone. And one day it all came crashing down, my marriage, of course. That evening I came home and met the surprise of my life. Alex was drinking way too hard. He wasn't really a good drinker. He gets drunk so easily, but there on the couch I met him. I was concerned and went to him in worry to ask him what had gone wrong, and he just flung my hands away, calling them dirty. He threw some pictures at me, and when I checked them, it was me and Ben in it. He lashed out that he didn't know I was so cheap and gutsy to meet another man in his back. I was so terrified that night and asked how he knew. He said that he had known I had an affair behind his back because he had come across a text on my phone that said I should hide the affair from my husband. I remembered it was the last text Ben had sent after our first affair before he stopped texting. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to maintain my pride and told him he was cheating on me too with Daisy, and he just laughed and flung me his phone, telling me to read his texts. When I checked, all his conversations were work-related, nothing out of context, and they didn't always travel alone. They always traveled in groups with other writers in the project, and this left me embarrassed. Firstly, he knew I was cheating on him, and secondly, I thought I could use the fact of he and Daisy's affair to defend my actions, but it was debunked instantly. I left home embarrassed that evening and went to a nearby hotel where I cried and called Ben to inform him about what I was going through. He initially wanted to come to him, but I declined. I didn't want to see him, not that night or ever again. I just wanted him to know that I was in distress. Not that Ben had anything to lose if he broke up with him. He didn't have a wife. When I went back home, Alex already packed my bag by the door, and of course, I didn't expect him to though, but I was glad he did. He relieved me of the stress of packing my things myself, and he couldn't even stop glaring at me for once. He dropped me the divorce letter and told me to think about it carefully and sign it. I signed it and left him. That day we divorced. I'm still looking for where to stay, but right now I'm staying at Lauren's house. She's the only one I trust to keep her mouth shut. I need advice, and that's why I'm making this post on Reddit. What should I do? I can't go back home to my husband, and I don't even know what to do with Ben because I still like him. Can I get honest advice, please? Update. I see a lot of comments judging me and even having the effrontery to call me bad names. I know some of you are going to say I'm selfish, reckless, and stupid. And yeah, I've already seen some of those comments in my previous post. But let me tell you, they don't get to me. I've developed a thick skin, and I know that people are just jealous of my courage. I mean, who stays in a loveless marriage just to please society? Not me. I'd rather take a chance on happiness, even if it doesn't work out. At least I tried. At least I acknowledged that my marriage was broken and took steps to fix it, even if that meant ending it. And to all the people saying I'm a homewrecker or a cheater, let me tell you, my marriage was already broken. I just acknowledged it and moved on. I didn't cheat on my husband because I wanted to hurt him. I did it because I wanted to feel alive. And yeah, it was a mistake, but it was also a wake-up call. I'm not going to apologize for my choices. I'm not going to apologize for being human. And I'm definitely not going to apologize for seeking happiness. If that makes me selfish, then so be it. I'd rather be selfish and happy than selfless and miserable. I'm tired of people judging me without knowing the full story. I'm tired of people assuming they know what's best for me. And I'm tired of people trying to bring me down just because I'm trying to lift myself up. So go ahead and hate. Go ahead and comment. But at the end of the day, I'm still going to be living my best life, and you're still going to be stuck in your own misery. I'm still not engaging with hate comments. But I do want to say thank you to all the people who dropped kind comments. Your kind words and encouragement mean the world to me. Keep shining, and let's rise above the haters together. I just wanted to add that I'm not looking for sympathy or validation. I'm just sharing my story in the hopes that it might help someone else who's going through a similar situation. So let's keep the conversation civil and supportive, okay? I just had to share this with you all because I'm still fuming. So I was talking to Lauren I thought was a friend, and they told me that I should just apologize to my ex and try to work things out. First of all, I've already tried that multiple times, and it didn't work. Because my ex doesn't want to work on our relationship. He just wants me gone, and honestly, I don't want to keep embarrassing myself in front of him. Nope. And secondly, why should I apologize for seeking happiness? Why should I apologize for leaving a marriage I know wouldn't even work out in the end? He already knows I cheated, and he won't even look at me the way he used to. I know it. It's like people think I'm just going to go back to my ex and be like, "Oh, sorry I cheated on you. Let's just forget about it and move on." No, that's not how it works. I'm done with people trying to tell me what I should do with my life. I'm done with people judging me for my choices. And I'm definitely done with people trying to guilt trip me into going back to a relationship that ended in a mutual agreement. If only someone can just understand what I'm really trying to point out. If you're going to give me advice, at least make it constructive. At least make it supportive. Otherwise, just keep your opinions to yourself. I know some of you are going to say, but what about forgiveness? And trust me, I really haven't forgiven myself, and I'm sure Alex will probably not forgive me. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to a relationship that ended. It entails moving on and forgetting things that happened. Update. You guys, I am still trying to process what just happened. So, I was talking to someone who told me that I should just talk to Ben and clear the air if he still wanted us together. Like, okay, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe we can have a civilized conversation and move on. Maybe we can even laugh about it and be friends. So I got to Ben's office nervous, and then I found out from his coworkers that he's married. Like, what? I couldn't believe it. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. All this time I thought Ben was single, available, and interested in me. But no, he's been lying to me from the start. He's been playing me like a fool. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I'm still trying to process my emotions. But one thing is for sure. I am done with Ben. I am done with liars and cheaters. Not that I'm an exception and people who don't care about me. And to the person who told me to talk to Ben, thanks for the advice, I guess. But maybe next time, do your research before telling someone to confront their soulmate. Maybe next time, consider the fact that the person might be a manipulative liar. I'm still shaking with anger and hurt. I've lost from both sides. I didn't believe Ben could do this to me, and I already left Alex. I just wanted to add that I'm not looking for sympathy or pity. I'm just sharing my story in the hopes that it might help someone else avoid a similar situation. So let's keep the conversation real and honest. You guys, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm regretful. I'm regretful for divorcing my husband. I'm regretful for cheating on him. And I'm regretful for thinking that the grass was greener on the other side. Being alone has given me a lot of time to reflect on my actions, and I realize now that I made a huge mistake. My husband wasn't perfect, but he loved me, and I loved him. We had a good life together, and I threw it away for something that didn't even exist. Ben was a lie and a distraction. He didn't even love me, and I had given him my soul and my affection. He made me lose Alex. I miss my husband. I miss our life together, and I miss the love we shared. If only I could go back in time, I would do things differently, and I would work on our marriage, communicate better, and appreciate what we had, and even understand our differences. But as we know, life doesn't give you do-overs, and now I'm left to piece together the broken parts of my life that are left. So I decided to try and follow the advice from the comment session that talked about not going to Alex for an apology, but to meet with his family and come clean to them, and I did just that. You guys, I'm still reeling from what just happened, so I went to Alex's family's house, hoping they could forgive me and help me talk to Alex, even if we wouldn't come back together, but to just forgive me. They didn't even let me in the door. They just stood there, looking at me with anger and disgust, and told me they knew what I did. They knew I cheated on their son. I guess Alex didn't waste time in telling them that we were over and just needed to submit the letter at the court to finalize our separation. And they were angry. They were angry at me for hurting their son, for breaking up his marriage. I tried to explain, I tried to tell them the truth, but they wouldn't listen. They just kept saying I was a homewrecker, a cheater, and a liar. And you know what? I don't blame them. I would be angry too if I were in their shoes. I wouldn't even want to get back together with me if it was possible. Honestly, it's hard to hear, and it's also hard to face the consequences of my actions. I'm trying to own up to my mistakes, to take responsibility for my choices. So it's clear now that I'm not welcome in their lives, and that's okay. I don't expect forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who has been supporting me through this. It means a lot to me and to Alex's family. I understand your anger, and I respect it. I hope someday we can have a more honest conversation. Update. Hey guys, I'm being honest with you. The past few days have been tough. I thought I was doing okay, but the constant barrage of negative comments online is getting to me. I know I shouldn't read them. I know I shouldn't let them get to me, but it's hard when it feels like the whole world is against you. People are calling me a cheater, a liar, a homewrecker, and it hurts. It hurts because I know I've made mistakes, and I'm trying to own up to them. But what really gets me is when people say I'm only sorry because I got caught, that I'm only sorry because my life is falling apart. That's not true. I'm sorry because I hurt people I care about. I'm sorry because I was blind and stupid, and I'm sorry because I'm human. I know I don't deserve sympathy, but a little kindness would go a long way right now. Also, there's another issue I'm having. Remember Lauren, the friend I'm staying with? So, Lauren just told me that if I can't even go to my parents' house and tell them the truth, then maybe I shouldn't be staying with her, and honestly, I don't blame her. I'm a mess. But here's the thing, I have nowhere else to go. My parents' house is not an option right now. That's a whole other story. And I'm running out of funds fast. Business has been slow, and I'm barely scraping by. I've been thinking of moving to Orange County, California. I know, it's expensive, but I need a fresh start. However, getting a house there is proving to be impossible. Prices are through the roof, and I'd run broke in no time if I use up all my savings. Any advice, guys? Update. I thought I had hit rock bottom before, but I was wrong. Today, I finally worked up the courage to go home and tell my parents everything. I mean, everything. The affair, the divorce, the financial struggles, everything. I was hoping for support, for guidance, for a shoulder to cry on, but what I got was a lecture. A long, painful lecture about how I had destroyed my marriage myself, how I had thrown away a good man, and how I had brought shame to our family. And then, the final blow, they told me not to come home for a while, that I needed to figure out my own life before I could come back to theirs. I'm numb, guys. I'm numb and I'm hurt and I'm angry. I know I don't deserve sympathy, but I thought my parents would be the one place I could find some understanding. I'm starting to feel like I'm running out of options. I met up with a few friends, hoping to borrow some money to get back on my feet. I know I've made mistakes, and I'm not expecting anyone to bail me out. But I thought maybe, just maybe, someone would be willing to help me out. But it seems like everyone's pockets are dry. One by one, they told me they couldn't help me out. Some of them didn't even want to meet up, like they were afraid of being associated with me. I saw the judgment in their eyes, the disappointment, the "how could you be so stupid" look. I get it, I really do. I've made mistakes, and I'm paying for them. But it's hard not to take it personally when it feels like everyone is turning their back on me. It's hard not to wonder if I'll ever be able to get back on my feet, if I'll ever be able to rebuild my life. I've always been the strong one, the one who had it together, but now I'm the one who's falling apart. And it's hard to ask for help, hard to admit that I need it. I know I need to keep trying, but it's hard to keep going when it feels like the whole world is against me. I feel like I'm drowning in my mistakes, suffocating under the weight of my own failures. I just wish someone would throw me a lifeline, just one person who would say, "I believe in you, I'll help you get through this." But it seems like that person is nowhere to be found. I finally worked up the courage to meet Ben in his office, thanks to someone's advice on my last post. I was nervous, but I knew I had to confront him and ask him for help, at least to make up for lying to me. As soon as I walked in, he stood up and smiled, acting like he missed me. He even had the nerve to tell me how beautiful I looked, how much he'd missed seeing me. But I wasn't having it. I told him to drop the act, that I knew exactly what he was. He tried to charm me, to sweet-talk me, but I cut him off. I told him I didn't have time for games, that I needed help, and then I asked him for money. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to try. But what he said next left me speechless. He told me he'd provide me with a house, a beautiful house, if I agreed to keep seeing him privately, like I was some kind of mistress, some kind of secret lover. He even had the nerve to tell me that he'd take care of me, that I'd never have to worry about anything again. I was furious. How dare he think I'd stoop to that level? How dare he think I'd trade my dignity for a roof over my head? I told him no, of course. I told him I'd rather die than be his secret lover. I told him I'd rather struggle on my own than be beholden to him. And then I walked out of his office, leaving him and his audacity behind. I'm still shaking with anger, still trying to process what just happened. But one thing's for sure. I'll never go back to him, never trade my self-worth for anything. I'm done with Ben, done with his lies and his manipulation. I'm done with being treated like some sort of a cheap stock, waiting to be bought at any time. I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone who has commented on my posts, both the kind ones and the not-so-kind ones. Your words, whether they were harsh or helpful, have made me realize so much about myself and my situation. To those who told me I was stupid, that I deserved what happened, that I was a cheater and a liar, thank you. Your words stung, but they also made me see that I wasn't perfect, that I had made mistakes. And for that, I'm grateful. Also, to those who offered me kindness, support, and encouragement, thank you. Your words lifted me up when I needed it most and reminded me that I wasn't alone. I'm happy to say that I finally found a new place to call home, a beautiful little house that I'm renting using my savings. It's not perfect, but it's mine, and it's a fresh start. I'm also working hard to promote my gigs and get new work. It's not easy, but I'm determined to make it happen. I want to be able to support myself, to stand on my own 2 feet. I wanted to share one last update with you all. Today, I emailed Alex an apology letter. I know. Some of you might be thinking, why are you apologizing to him? But hear me out. I realized that I've been carrying around a lot of guilt and shame for my part in our affair, and I needed to let go of that. I needed to take responsibility for my actions and apologize for the hurt I caused him and his family. My email wasn't about trying to get him back or trying to rekindle anything. It was simply about closure. I wanted him to know that I'm truly sorry for my part in everything, and that I hope he can find it in his heart to forgive me. I don't know if he'll respond or if he'll even read it, but I needed to do it for myself. I needed to close this chapter of my life and move on. Thanks for following along on this journey with me, everyone. It's been a wild ride, but I'm glad it's over. Thanks again, everyone. Your words have changed me in ways you'll never know. Goodbye, and good luck to us all.